you just like you said, you have to like basically reprogram yourself. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so could you speak on that a little bit?
I would love to, yes. So there's a few things that are super important when it comes to that transition process that really have to be faced. Number one is that the reality of how much money you can make doing that is super distorted. Like it doesn't exist anywhere else. You know, you can make $500 as a lawyer, maybe.
Welcome to another episode coming at you from chooseyourrelationships.com, author of Love Can't Wait, which can be found on amazon.com. So today I have another special guest. However, before I get into that, like, share this episode, tell me, send me any topics, any concerns, anything that you want me to talk about. And I would appreciate it if you left me a review on iTunes. So today I have another special guest. I know I always say that, you know, but today I've been looking forward to this conversation. She's a relationship and life coach, board certified clinical sexologist. She's passionate about helping people see past their own limitations, traumas, and pain and grow into their best version of self. Today, my special guest is Hannah Spanke. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. And you give extra points for saying my name right, because most of the time they don't.
Yeah, I get that all the time, so I can relate to that. So thanks for taking time to do this once again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So where are you from?
I'm from California. If you're not from California, I'm not from California. That probably pops in your mind. I'm from right in the center of the state, like very agriculture, farming kind of vibe. And then a few years ago, I moved down to San Diego on my own, lived there for 3 years. Now I'm in northern Kentucky briefly. This is the first and last winter I will ever sustain. And I'm going back to San Diego this upcoming summer.
Okay. So how did you become a life coach and a clinical sexologist? Because, you know, this is not like, we don't go to school for this. We don't grow up and say, hey, you know, one day I want to be a life coach. I want to help people with their relationships, you know. So what's your story? How did you get started?
Yeah, so this is funny. The first thing that comes to mind is I remember being like, I think I was 9 or 10 years old. I don't know if you remember, what was the name of it? There was a show, I think it was either on like E or Oxygen, and it was like Talk Sex with Dr. Sue or something like that. The old lady, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And so I was like 10 years old, never even kissed a person before. And I remember I came across the show on TV and I was like so piqued. I was like so interested in what was going on. And I knew I wasn't supposed to be watching it. And so it was kind of secretive. But somebody called in on the show. I'll never forget it. They asked some sex question about like how they could start to enjoy swallowing or something like that. And I'm thinking, what does that mean? Like, I didn't know anything at all. So that kind of set me off on this path of like Googling all kinds of stuff. And I, from that age, I knew I had an interest in that kind of work, but I just never knew how it would play out. I didn't want to go the traditional route of like through college and the red tape and being put in a box, having some sort of state license. You can only work with a certain amount of people. All that kind of stuff just really turned me off. And so that was, I guess, the seed. And then my personal history, I ended up traversing through almost a decade of the sex industry myself as a sex worker. Anything you could think of under that umbrella, I probably did it. And through my own healing out of that industry, which required a shit ton of it, to really get myself to, I had to completely rebuild myself, like relearn, rebuild, unlearn, all of it. And then through the healing, through the personal experience, through what I learned with like my insider view in that industry of like why people's relationships weren't working, why they were coming to me in the first place. Why were they going to a strip club? Why were they hiring a girl outside of their marriage? That kind of thing. It just kind of, all of those pieces sort of came together, and I discovered coaching in 2018. And then that was like the biggest light bulb of my life. Like, oh, this is a thing. This is an option. And so I never knew what it was before that. And I was at a conference. There were people like, there was a coach coaching like trading in Spanish, somebody talking about like how to homeschool your kids. Like I saw such a vast like ocean of possibilities with that. And so I really took that and ran with it. And that's how it's turned into what it is today for me.
Wow, good. So how did you know that there was such thing as a relationship coach even before you went to this event? You know, because I didn't really I didn't know people were teaching this stuff. I didn't know that it was I didn't know they got magazines, you know, they got, you know, people had products and I know they had a handful of books were out, but it's like a whole industry, you know, out there.
Right.
So did you know about it?
I would say I had like the tiniest bit of awareness about just maybe more life coaching, like, and that my only thought of that was like Tony Robbins. Like that was what came to mind when I would think of that. But I didn't really understand that it was an industry outside of Tony Robbins. And then I knew that, you know, just in anything I was very entrepreneurial growing up, and that's how I was raised. So like, I knew that if you're going to do anything, it's like health, wealth, or relationships. Those are the main things that you're going to do it under. One of those categories, that's where you go. And so I knew that there was probably something like that, but I didn't know what it looked like until I really saw it with my own eyes a few years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Yeah. So how'd you have the confidence that, you know, say, hey, you know what, I can do this. I can show people how to do this. You know, did it have something to do with your upbringing or your past experience or what?
Yeah, I would say it had everything to do with my upbringing, but also my past experience with the sex industry. And those two things like totally were not complementary. They worked against each other. Like I was raised with in my ear all the time from my dad, like, you can just create whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. Like, you can do it. Like, just total entrepreneur pushed on me totally the whole time I was growing up. But through the sex industry, I like accumulated a shit ton of trauma and stuff that I had to work through around my identity. And the transition of starting to charge people money for my expertise coming from my mind and my emotions and my like lived experience coming from the place of charging money for my body, like that was a massive bridge that I had to cross. And it was like I was building the bridge as I was crossing it. It was a major healing process for me to claim my worth. This discovering the industry is really kind of what showed me that I didn't believe I could do it in the very beginning. I knew I could in my mind, but like there was stuff below the surface that really needed to be worked through so that I could step into it. And then through that process, I would say that's a big piece of how I help people with their own lives now, like really realizing you can fucking do it if you want to, if you decide to.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I know I think there's a misconception that somehow that some women that maybe they become strippers or get in the sex industry. The misconception is that all they had to do it, they were poor. It's all about survival. And that's not true because I grew up with a girl. I went to high school with a girl. She didn't grow up poor at all. She just moved to Florida, and I think like maybe 5 years later, she sent me a picture. She said, "Hey, I work at the strip club now." So the misconception is that hey, these women, they've been taken advantage of by somebody. Somebody made them do it. They grow up poor or something like that. But I also would like to say is even when a lot of the when she tried to transition out of the strip club, I realized she had the same mentality. It's kind of like you just like you said, you have to like basically reprogram yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so could you speak on that a little bit?
I would love to, yes. So there's a few things that are super important when it comes to that transition process that really have to be faced. Number one is that the reality of how much money you can make doing that is super distorted. Like it doesn't exist anywhere else. You know, you can make $500 as a lawyer, maybe a high paid lawyer after 8 years of college and many years in your business and all kinds of like blood, sweat, and tears. But you can walk into a strip club at 18 and make $500 in an hour, you know? And so it's like, it really creates this super unhealthy attachment to how much money you can make for the amount of earned like work that you really have to put in. Not to say it isn't work, but it's not work that applies to any other part of the reality we live in. You know, it's just really distorted. It's a really like a thing on its own. And when it comes to, I was just talking about this with somebody the other day. There's this argument for people that believe that it's empowering if a woman decides to do it on her own. It's not. First of all, let's just make that clear. It's not. And one of the misconceptions is that it's just a service. All you have to do is show up and be hot. It's just a service. That's absolutely not true. Like getting your fucking burger at Denny's is a service. Getting your oil changed is a service, and you don't have any say or ability to say what that person acts like, what that person looks like, what that person does for you, like what their attitude is. When it comes to sex work, it's a full-blown performance. You have to give every single part of yourself away in order to do it successfully. And so that is really, really traumatic for how you're able to like feel your own worth in any other industry, because like I said, it just doesn't translate to the rest of the world. It's very isolated in how it works. And so it can be isolating when you're so deep in it. It's like, shit, I don't have anywhere else to go. So that's the catch. Even when you decide your way into it, you're not forced. It's not human trafficking. You're not like being beaten at home and decide you have no other option. You might feel empowered in the beginning, but eventually you fall into that pattern, that trap that it is. And it's the most disempowering experience. It disconnects you from your true value and the way the world works. And so for me, that's what it was. I wasn't forced. I wasn't pushed. It was completely my own agenda. And what I've noticed is with women who are not in that category of like super desperate, super, you know, the typical thing that comes to mind when you think about it sometimes, like you said, if they're not in that category, what I notice is the common thread between women who choose to do it is there's some version of emotional childhood trauma. Like they didn't learn how to value themselves because their parents were absent. They, didn't have the love and care that they needed to develop that as a child. And so there's a disconnect between their mind, their body, how they see themselves, how others see themselves, or how others see them. And it just creates a big ass open door for that industry to look appealing.
Yeah, I've met a handful of women that were like, it seemed like they, when they get, and some of these women don't necessarily have to be sex workers or, or in the strip club or anything like that. But it's like they don't. If you like this video, share this video. And if you want to support my channel, click the thanks tab and leave me a donation. 2, 5, 10.